Today we're talking about if the Boston Celtics or the Milwaukee Bucks are now the better team after the recent trades that took place. Hey, how's it going, everyone? I'm Steven. Welcome to my channel. If you like NBA content, you are here for the correct thing. Today we're talking about the Boston Celtics, who recently acquired Jrue Holiday, and the Milwaukee Bucks, who recently acquired, of course, Damian Lillard. Now, a lot has been said about these trades recently. A lot of people have talked about the individual effect on each team. But now that the smoke has cleared a little bit, and no, we have not seen these players actually play yet for their respective teams, but they have reported to training camps. You've seen them a little bit a part of media day. You've seen some of Dame's comments. You've definitely seen Jrue Holiday be a little sad about leaving the Bucks, which is understandable after his run there. But today I want to talk about which team we think is actually going to be better in the upcoming season. So, the Boston Celtics last year went 57-25. They were the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference behind the Milwaukee Bucks, who were 58-24. Now, both of these teams ultimately fell to the 8th seed, and excuses can be made for that. Of course, Giannis was injured, and of course, Jason Tatum kind of got injured in that Game 7. But Boston Celtics, of course, faltered before that Jason Tatum injury. Now, when we're looking at the starting lineups for these teams, sorry, I have notes right here. If you see me peering off, those are my notes. When we're talking about the starting lineups for these teams, of course, we're probably going to see Derek White, Jrue Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Kristaps Porzingis. Big thing to note there is the fact that Marcus Smart's gone, Robert Williams is gone, Malcolm Brogdon is gone. Those are all big losses we're going to talk about a little bit today. The Milwaukee Bucks will probably be starting Damian Lillard, Chris Middleton, Giannis, Brook Lopez. And then I think that other spot is going to be something Adrian Griffin plays with a little bit at the beginning of the season. We'll probably see some different things in preseason. It's definitely not set yet, but I do expect it to be something like maybe Pat Connaughton, maybe Malik Beasley, maybe even Beauchamp. I think it really is going to depend on who's hot a little bit. But they will ultimately decide on who fits that role, and then they'll probably roll with it. And both of these starting lineups, starting with the Celtics, I mean, it's a tough starting lineup. It's probably, in my opinion, the best starting 5 in the whole entire league. We're talking about 5. Derek White was never an all-star, I suppose, but we're talking about 4 former all-stars. Just an incredible lineup. The defense, Derek White's a great defender. Of course, Jrue Holiday, all defense. You know, he has a long history of being probably the best point of attack defender in the whole league. Great at navigating screens, on ball, off ball. You continually hear other players in the NBA say Jrue Holiday is the most difficult defender to deal with on the perimeter. So they have the best perimeter defender in all of ball. And that's adding to a system that last year had the number 3 defensive rating. So, do we think the Boston Celtics got better defensively than last year? They did lose Marcus Smart, former Defensive Player of the Year in his own right. Robert Williams, who when healthy was a great rim protector. Malcolm Brogdon, not necessarily known for his defense, but he did pack a little bit of a punch off the bench in general. I think they ultimately, their defensive rating, I think, in the regular season is not going to be as high as last year. They were number 3 last year, which is, obviously extremely high. They had a really talented group, and I think they focused a lot on defense, and I know Jason Tatum and those guys have said that's something they even want to double down on, because I think more so they struggled in the playoffs with that. And I think they have a great lineup playoffs-wise defensively, assuming KP is healthy, which for now, we're assuming all players are healthy. I mean, any team, you could say, depth could be a problem. If this guy goes down, I mean, that's any team in the NBA with all-stars on it. If LeBron James gets hurt, the Lakers are cooked. If Anthony Davis gets hurt, you know what I mean? Sorry, I'm a Lakers fan, so that's what I go straight to. But if Jokic gets hurt, I mean, all of these teams, if one of those main rotation guys gets hurt, that's what happens. You're in trouble. So, if healthy, I think they have a really good defensive group. I do expect in the regular season they're probably top 6, top 7. I do expect a little bit of a drop off just because they lost Marcus Smart and they lost Robert Williams, Al Horford's going to be coming off the bench. Kristaps Porzingis played really well last year. He can protect the rim, but I don't think he is quite a defensive force that Robert Williams is. Obviously, he's much more talented offensively. So I do expect a little bit of drop off in that realm. But that being said, I think in the playoffs, having Jrue Holiday, he can go straight up against Damian Lillard. He can go straight up against, any of those best players on other teams. If they're playing the Sixers, he's got James Harden. He can guard Tyrese Maxey. The Heat, he can go up and try and guard Jimmy Butler. He did struggle with that last year in the playoffs, but, sometimes people's offense is just better than defense. So you always want to be able to put that talented guy on them. Coming off the bench for the Boston Celtics is Peyton Pritchard. He's not bad. He's not great. He's definitely a downgrade from Malcolm Brogdon last year. I think Peyton Pritchard expects some sort of contract extension, and he's going to get a lot of opportunity to prove that he deserves it. But, Peyton Pritchard, okay. You're going to have Hauser, who's a good shooter. I think it's going to be a situation where they're going to have to try and keep their starters on the floor, some mix of their starters, I should say. I don't think at any time they should have any sort of platoon substitution, and I think Joe Mazzulla knows that. But I do expect Hauser, he's going to make some threes. Of course, they have Al Horford, who at times maybe he'll find himself in the starting lineup. I don't know, but he is obviously the best player off their bench, but he is getting older. As you age, you get a little more injury prone, you get a little slower, but he is a really intelligent player. He can obviously stretch the floor, and I expect him to be a big contributor this year, as he has been in the past. He's a decent switch defender. As he gets older, obviously, he's a little slower. It's a little more difficult. He doesn't jump super high. He can't go up and protect the rim, but he can get vertical. He can hold his ground against some bigs. And then you have Kornet, who, I don't know what the rotation is going to be like, but Kornet got some playing time last year, so let's say he gets some playing time this year. He's got his little contest thing. I don't have a lot to say about Luke Kornet. The Celtics bench is just, O'Shea Brissett will probably play a little. Svi will probably play some. They have a bunch of guys who are not super well-rounded players. They do maybe one or two things really good. They're kind of all specialists. And so they're just going to have to try and slot these guys in the regular season. And I think this year, all of those starters from the Celtics are going to play more minutes than they did last year. I just think that's what they're going to have to do to win games, especially if they want to be a top 2 seed again. Last year, they had a number 2 offensive rating. And with the addition of Kristaps Porzingis, I don't see much drop-off there. They definitely got better offensively. Kristaps Porzingis can stretch the floor. He averaged over 20 points per game last year. It was a career year. And Jrue Holiday is no slouch. If you're Jrue Holiday and you're probably the 4th option on this team after, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, KP, and then maybe Jrue, there's not going to be as much attention on him, and obviously experienced that a lot where he was probably the 3rd option in Milwaukee. He can get you a bucket. He can, of course, make the 3, especially if it's just a spot-up shot. He can make it. So I feel like Jrue Holiday will probably average somewhere, high teens. I expect him to take on somewhat of like a Mike Conley role a little bit, where he doesn't score a ton, but I know he's a totally different player than Mike Conley, but I just mean in terms of scoring, he'll score when the opportunity kind of arises, but I don't think he's going to be looking for his own shot a ton, and I think he's going to be really just focused on playing tough defense and hitting those open shots when he gets them. So I don't expect their offensive rating to drop off a lot. Last year they were number 1 in net rating. I think maybe they're going to drop a little bit, because I do think they're one of the best teams in the league, obviously. I expect them to be probably top 3 in net rating still. Now, going over the Milwaukee Bucks roster. Dame, I have Malik Beasley just written in as starting at the 2. Who knows if he will. I only have him slotted in because he can shoot, but at the same time, he's pretty awful defensively, and that next to Dame might not be the best idea, so maybe they slide in Connaughton. Probably not Jay Crowder. But let's just say Malik Beasley, Connaughton, whatever. Then you got Chris Middleton, Giannis, Brook Lopez. This lineup is amazing as well. Brook Lopez can stretch the floor. Dame can shoot. Chris Middleton can shoot. Connaughton, Beasley, they can shoot. Beasley's a little streaky, but I think offensively this lineup is stellar. It gives Giannis the space to do what he wants inside. If you're going to help off Dame, if you're going to help off Brook, if you're going to help off anybody on this team, to guard Giannis Antetokounmpo, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a huge problem because Giannis is going to dish the ball out. And that's what I really want to see from Giannis this year. Giannis is going to get a lot more opportunity this year than ever before, I think, because he's playing with Dame, to showcase his playmaking ability. And I really want to see what that's going to look like for him. I expect his assists to go up a little bit this year, not drastically necessarily, but at least a little bit. And then off the bench, we have Cam Payne, who recently signed, who in his son's tenure, never was some sort of amazing player, but he did contribute, some meaningful playmaking and points off the bench at times, although I can't stand his jump shot. But then you're going to have Connaughton or Malik Beasley, obviously very streaky. You're probably going to have Jay Crowder. You're hopefully going to have Beauchamp show some signs of really improving this year. He's 6'6", tons of potential for that guy defensively. And then, of course, you're going to have Bobby Portis coming off his stint with Team USA and FIBA. And you do have Robin Lopez on the team. I don't know if he's going to get out there, but he is going to be an option at 5, especially if you're playing like a bigger team. Maybe you want to roll Bobby Portis at the 4 off the bench and Rolo at the 5 off the bench. I don't know. That being said, I really prefer the Bucks bench and depth over the Celtics, and I think that'll be really important during the regular season. I do think the Bucks are going to be the number 1 seed again this year, and I think a lot of that is going to have to do with the depth, actually. Ultimately, they're going to be able to rest their guys a little bit more, which I think is important, especially for Damian Lillard, who is getting up there in age a little bit. I think that, you don't want those guys playing mid to high 30s every night. You want them playing low 30s. And if the opportunity rises and there's a blowout, you want them playing in the 20s. So I think they're going to get a little bit more rest and ultimately capture the 1 seed. Talking about their ratings last year. Last year they had the number 4 defensive rating in all of basketball. And they did lose, obviously, the best defender, point of attack defender in the entire league, which is obviously a big deal. But ultimately, I think their defensive rating is going to be similar. I don't think they're going to fall off that much because you still have Giannis, you still have Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate last year, and I think Giannis can be a Defensive Player of the Year candidate any year. So I don't think they're going to drop off drastically. You also have Bobby Portis off the bench. You're not going to get absolutely torched when your bench unit comes in. Not that I'm saying Bobby Portis is DPOY, but when you look at the Celtics bench, Boston's bench Milwaukee's bench has a lot more potential to compete out there and just be a little bit better, I think. And I think that's going to be important in the long run because by the time we get to the playoffs, you don't want your guys to be so ultimately wiped out that just fatigued going into the playoffs. You want them to be able to get some rest, and ultimately when they get to the playoffs, they're ready to go. So I think the Milwaukee Bucks are going to finish around, I'll say the Bucks will probably finish around 57 wins, and I think the Celtics are going to finish around 55. I think both teams are going to be really good, 1-2 in the Eastern Conference. And I think that one big factor is I do think the Celtics are going to start off a little bit hotter just because this is the second year of Joe Mazzulla. A lot of those players are more familiar with the system now. I think Joe Mazzulla is more familiar with running a team. The guy kind of got assigned to being a coach right before training camp last year. So I think he's just going to be more prepared. The team's going to be more prepared, know what's going on. They're not going to be in crisis mode entering the season. So I think that's going to play a little bit in their favors. But ultimately, the Bucks are going to figure out how to play together. Giannis and Dame are going to get used to playing off one another. And I do think they'll finish with a better record going into the playoffs. And in the playoffs, I ultimately think obviously, like, health is going to be a big factor. Who's healthy at that point? But if we're assuming everyone is healthy, I think depth matters a lot less in the playoffs. You're going to have like a 7-man rotation. Celtics are probably going to have a 7-man rotation. I bet you they play Pritchard and Horford off the bench in the playoffs. And then the Bucks might go a little bit deeper because they might play Bobby Portis. They'll probably play Campaign, Pat Connaughton, Malik Beasley. Maybe they'll have 7 or 8. They might have one more. And starting 5-wise, I think the Celtics have a better starting 5. But I think the Bucks ultimately win the series. I think it'll be a long series. But I think if they match up in the Eastern Conference Finals, I think that I got the Bucks. I'm not going to not choose a team here. You know, the point of the video is, who do I think is the better team? I think it's the Bucks in the playoffs. I think when you have a top 3 player on your team and you add next to that a top 10, maybe 15 player in Damian Lillard, ultimately in the playoffs, that's what's going to matter. Those guys are going to close out games, and those guys are going to get it done. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Jason Tatum in his own right is a top 10 player. Jaylen Brown is not a top 10 player. And ultimately, when it comes to the playoffs, I think it comes down to your superstars. Your role players might get you a game. They're important. And, you know, the Celtics have a better starting 5. But ultimately, the Milwaukee Bucks will be coming out of the East this year. They will have a better record than the Boston Celtics. That is my take. Hey, I appreciate you guys watching this video. We're going to be trying to make videos here a couple times a week. You know, we love hoops here. I'm Steven. I appreciate you guys watching. If you enjoyed the video, maybe just leave it a like, maybe subscribe, and there will be more to come. Thanks, guys. Peace.